Welcome to Her Imprint, part of the Impressions Exchange. I'm Denise Gustafson, your host. This podcast celebrates the remarkable women who are transforming the printing industry. We'll explore their journeys, from challenges to triumphs, and share the stories that leave a lasting imprint. Today, I have Elizabeth Rees. She's founder of Chasing Paper. So, Elizabeth, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
To get us started, can you explain a little bit about Chasing Paper and what the company does?
Absolutely. Chasing Paper is a thoughtfully designed, removable, and traditional wall coverings company. We got our start as one of the first to market in the peel and stick wallpaper space almost 13 years ago, which is crazy to think that it's been that long. At the time, I was living in New York City and I really saw wallpaper and wall coverings taking off. It was in every cool restaurant I went into, every hotel, every bar. And it was something that had gone away in the US market for decades. And I really saw it starting to come back. But as a renter myself at the time, and all of my friends were renting apartments as well, I thought, wouldn't it be cool if there was a way that you could have the transformational aspects of wallpaper, but something where you're still going to get your security deposit back. It's not going to mess up the walls, but still being able to really customize your space. There were a couple people at the time doing peel and stick, but not in a way that I thought that me and my friends would be interested in. The designs weren't super thoughtful. It was a lot of like clip art and decals and things like that, or mainly for children's spaces or very kind of specific types of aesthetics. And so Chasing Paper was really born out of that need and want for myself. And we did just peel and stick for about 6 or 7 years. And then as we got more and more trade, so meaning residential and commercial trade members interested and excited, interior designers, we saw that there was a real want and need for the traditional kind of wall covering as well. And we started doing those projects ad hoc, but they grew to a number where we were doing so many custom projects that we just decided to add it to the website. And now it represents 50% of our business. 50% is the peel and stick, and 50% is the more traditional paste wall coverings. And yeah, it's just been such a fun way. We work with tons of different artists and designers to create one of a kind collections. The best part of my job is seeing our wall coverings in people's homes and just the ethos and the story of their home and their house. And I'll never hopefully get tired of seeing that. It's really thrilling and fun.
That sounds amazing. I can only imagine just the people you work with and how personal some of those designs have to be,
Yeah.
and really what it looks like in their space, and really how it brings those spaces to life.
Yeah. And how one print can be used in so many different ways. And when you're able to breathe your own creativity, your own personal style, personal aesthetic, matching the wallpaper with all of your treasures and all of the things that you have in your own homes. And it really creates just such one of a kind memories. And we always say too that it's the backdrop to so many of your memories, the things that the spaces that you have. I love it when people come up to me, which is often, and they tell me about a wallpaper that their grandmother had or a wallpaper that they had in their bedroom growing up, because those are really, it's such a nostalgic thing that's very deep in our brains. And sometimes you don't necessarily, it's not the first thing that maybe you remember, but then as you are going back into your memory or into your childhood, or you say, oh, or you see maybe a wallpaper print, and you say, oh, I had a print just like that in my room growing up. It's a real honor for me to have the wallpaper be a part of people's homes, a part of a nursery, bringing a child home to a room that's been wallpapered in our paper. It's an honor and something that we really take seriously. We try to have the highest quality products and also really thoughtful, beautiful, special designs that will hopefully be something that people remember for a long time.
I can still remember my childhood wallpaper. I would not want to put it anywhere now.
Recreating it.
No, I would not want to, but especially you look back in pictures and you see
Yes.
it, pictures of family member houses,
Yes.
and you remember the times that you spent in those places, and that wallpaper is always part of it.
It is definitely, especially because it was so big in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and then it really went away in the United States, which is also a really interesting thing because in the rest of the world, especially Europe and the UK, it never went away. Wallpaper has remained very steadfast through all the decades. But that's actually what's been really fun about introducing this to the US market is that people have been slow to come around to it because I think a lot of us took down the wallpaper of the 80s and early 90s.
And it was hard work to get that stuff off the wall.
Right. Yeah. So people a lot of times have like PTSD stories to tell you. So,
I
their
do with the
little bit.
wallpaper steamer, getting it off
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
walls.
The
Yes.
scraper and the hot water, whatever method used to take down the paper. It's been a little bit of a slower process potentially for some people warming back up to the idea of wallpaper. But it's funny being in Wisconsin. I was in New York for many years, and people in New York were seeing this trend 10 years ago. But all my family and friends in Wisconsin would be like, girl, what are you doing? It's not coming back. And now they're all excited about wallpaper. So it's taken a little bit of a time to get to all the parts of the country and maybe get people on board with it. But I think it's such an incredible way to transform and personalize a space, much more than just paint can do. And I think people are excited by that.
Or like my best friend that bought a house in the 90s and all she wanted to do was paint and put up a border.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But we're seeing a lot of orders come out of designs in the UK and in Europe. And next year, you might be putting up a border too. You never know.
I'll make sure to tell her that way. Hey, your
Yeah,
border's coming back. It's time to
they're
put one
coming
up.
back.
So that was 13 years ago that you really got started here. Now, was
Yeah.
that your first foray into print, or did you have a history in print prior to that?
Yeah. My brother, who's my business partner, and I, we were born in the print industry. My dad and his dad had bought a business. It's been in my family for 3 generations. We built Chasing Paper sort of under the umbrella of that family business. And then about 5 years ago, we bought the business out from underneath that umbrella so that we could really carve our own direction and go our own way, which was an important part of my brother and my entrepreneurial journey. But yeah, ink, we always say ink is in our blood. So we've been in the digital printing business for over 20 years, or my family's business has, but a very long connection to the craft of printing and just all of the incredible journey that it's taken, certainly over the last century, but maybe more acutely in the last couple decades as digital printing technology has just come so far.
So far, I started in the printing industry reporting on it in 98.
Oh,
So
wow.
just the changes that have happened since I've started to now are tremendous.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's truly incredible. And just how people are adapting to it, I think, as well, in the industry and outside as well. Just what people are aware of and not. I think the print industry for a long time, people just didn't maybe know about the technology, but it's coming so much more ubiquitous. And there's just a lot more of an understanding, I think, of the printing industry now than there was even 10 years ago, I would say.
Now you say that basically ink was in your blood. So did you have a choice to go like to actually go into print or do something else, or was that something that was just in a way foreordained for you?
It's so funny. People ask me that a lot. My dad and was never really pushing us into it at all. And I went out and I worked for many years in other industries and never even thought that I would ever do something even related to printing. My family business does much more commercial printing. The way that I understood print to be growing up and even in my 20s was much different than I know it to be in my own business now. Commercial printing is commoditized in a lot of ways, right? So there's a different way of looking at how you price it, how you sell it, what it can be used for, the limitations, the capabilities. Being on more of a retail side of digital printing has allowed me to have a totally different relationship, I think, to it than maybe my dad did or my grandfather did, which I think is great. And I think that's a big part of family business in a lot of ways is being able to carve out your own sort of relationship to it. So my brother, he worked a lot more like in high school and into college for the family business. So it was perhaps a little bit maybe more preordained for him than it was for me, but I'm just as surprised as anyone that I'm doing what I'm doing. But it's been a wonderful way for me to have that connection to my dad and to my grandfather. And I actually never got to meet my grandfather. So it was pretty cool to continue something, a lineage of something that I was never really had firsthand knowledge of. I never got to meet him, but carrying on his legacy in some way.
Which is really cool, to say
Yeah.
the least. Now, in terms of printing, we all know, like you said, it was your grandfather that started it, your father, your brother.
Mm.
It tends to be very male dominated,
Yes.
as we know. A lot of women in the C suite in printing, if they make it there,
Right.
they can sometimes find themselves alone in a room filled with men.
Yeah.
How do you think that the printing industry should be addressing women in C-suite roles or the lack of women in C-suite roles?
My experience in the printing world has been just that, just as you've described it. A lot of times I walk in, especially when I was a little bit younger too, in my late 20s, early 30s, I would walk in and everyone would be like, what is this young woman doing here? Because also too, it tends to skew older too in those more leadership positions as well.
Mhm.
You tend to need more experience. I would say that things like you're doing. I think having more voices and having more ways for women to share their stories, share their experiences, I think is huge because I think as anytime you have a touchstone of a woman who's done it before you or has been able to walk in those shoes or set sort of an example, whether it's through a story or an experience, I think that can be very helpful. But I think more often than not, I think it's companies hoping to find that a different way of doing things is really exciting. There's all of these statistics that women run more profitable businesses. There's all of these statistics that really show that when women are in leadership positions, they run very productive, profitable businesses. The statistics say that maybe they're less risk averse. I find that in myself as well. Sometimes I'm not willing to bet it all, or I want to do things a little bit more methodically. I want to test and try, and then maybe put more resources once we've had a little bit of analytics or a green light to go in that direction. And I think that's an amazing way to run a business. It might not be as sexy as getting to growth faster. My hope for the industry is that we continue to make paths and make room for women to go down that road and to share their stories because I think the way women run businesses, I have so many female entrepreneurial friends and they're all running incredible kinds of businesses, whether it's in the print industry or out. And I have two daughters, so I want to be a great role model for them. And not necessarily only because I'm a woman, because I just think I'm a smart human being. I also don't want to paint the picture that it isn't an uphill battle, because I think it is. It's still very, very much lopsided in this industry. So lots of work to be done.
Yes, indeed. And when you were starting out, when you were that woman walking in, that lone woman, especially as you're a younger woman, what was it like? How did you feel in those moments? Did you feel like you really belong there? How did you deal with that? Because it can be very intimidating.
That's a great question. And I had an experience early on when we had a certain vendor who we then changed after this experience because he only wanted to talk to my dad or to my brother. He never wanted to address a issue or we were having an issue. And he would always leave me off the email or just email my dad or call my brother. And little did he know, my dad and brother had no decision making power with this particular decision. And I was so frustrated and I was also just so deflated because sometimes in those moments you're like, what more can I do? What more do I have to prove to be taken seriously to have this person see me as the decision maker? And I ultimately decided to pull the business from that vendor because I thought, you know what? I refuse to do business this way. I don't have to prove myself to this guy. I've done so much work. We were doing millions of dollars worth of business at that time. And I think it's having the confidence to say, I don't need to be doing business in a vacuum where it doesn't feel good to me or where I'm obviously not respected. I have the autonomy and the ability to change directions. And in that case, who knows? I probably never heard whether he was upset or not that I pulled the business. It was my decision. Setting those boundaries and having the autonomy and the self confidence to be able to make directional decisions, I think actually gave me more confidence, but also I think being able to set my own journey to have my own path. So that was just one way. But I also think having people in your corner who are going to back you up, support you in those ways, in those decisions. I have a lot of male friends and counterparts who will say, if I'm asked to speak on a board or a panel, to make sure that there's other voices represented, that it's not just a male perspective. And, or they'll bring me on. They'll say, hey, I'm speaking on this thing. Elizabeth, why don't you join me? So I think it's also about that, about pulling other people up. And I really try to do the same. If I'm asked to speak at something, making sure that I'm pulling either more women or people of color or whoever else onto stage with so that we have a more diverse representation of our industry because that's important.
It's very important. And honestly, our industry is diverse. Our industry is very diverse. It has such depth of character. It's one of those things that I think the more voices that you have, the better. You think of it like a chorus. The more voices you have, the better the end product becomes. That song becomes so much more melodious. It sounds so much better. Except
Yeah.
for if you just want to have one monotone, that's so different.
It's such a good, analogy because it's really true that the more that we can have and the more perspectives we can have, I know certainly for my business that it's the deeper that I can understand our customer, our vendors, all of the different people, the deeper that relationship is because of all of the different points of view, the different perspectives, that's when your business really flourishes. We see that every single day. The more that we listen, we take stock, we bring in those ideas, we try to critically think or critically work through a problem with lots of different voices and people. Those are the best solutions that we come up with for sure.
We're not homogenous by any stretch of the
Right.
imagination. And all of those experiences, everybody's background, we all come to the table with something very different.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And sometimes it could be that difference of perspective that really helps to change the direction. Maybe it's just of a job, or maybe it's just of a specific project, but maybe it changes the direction of a company and helps get it to that next level.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Now, you touched on something interesting that you try to be a support for those to get those diverse voices. And then you lean on others, male and or female.
Yep.
How can we do more of that? Is it through mentorship? I guess mentorship is part of it, but then peer to peer. What are ways that we can help to encourage that throughout the industry?
Mentorship has been a huge part of my career. I have had some wonderful mentors, both in and out of the category, that have truly changed the trajectory of my career. People that I know I can call if I'm working through an issue. I think at the heart of all of that, whether it's me mentoring someone or someone mentoring me or having small groups of people that come together, is it's really about transparency and about really having the trust of being able to really share the issue at hand, at stake, or the things that you're running into, the barriers that you're running into. Because I think a lot of times too, we sometimes get, and myself included, we get scared to share, whether it's money, whether it's a certain opportunity, whether it's an issue, bad or good. Sometimes we just hold back a little bit. And I think when we do that, we're doing ourselves a disservice and the people that we're interacting with because so many times I'll open up and be vulnerable and share something. Maybe it's how we price something or we didn't win a job or win some work. And when you unpack it, 9 times out of 10, they'll say, "Oh my God, I've been through the same exact thing. Here's how we worked through it." There is something so incredible about that. And not only do you really, I think, affirm that relationship, but it allows you to say, okay, I am not so alone in this. And to me, I think that's the key to it is being able to be vulnerable enough to say, I don't have it all figured out. I think I made a mistake here, or this is how I ran through it. What would you have done? To me, that vulnerability to be really transparent about what we're working through. Again, I think as women, a lot of times we tend to hold things a little closer to the chest. And a lot of times, too, the women who are working towards that C suite or working towards that, I think a lot of times it can be very insular. And I think the more we can crack that open and allow for other people to see the good and the bad, I think that allows for people to work through or work up faster and get to the solution more quickly, which I think that's always a positive.
It's interesting. In talking with a lot of women, one thing that has been a continuous or constant theme is that many women feel that they have to work harder to prove themselves. And part of that, I think, goes into the wanting to hold back, not being as vulnerable, because
Yep.
we have to work so hard to get somewhere that maybe our male counterpart doesn't have to work as hard. And
Sure.
then there's the other layer of especially those with families. You
Yeah.
say you have 2 daughters. There's that other perspective or that other piece that is always layered on, is that role tends to be with women with child rearing and
Yep.
dealing with the house.
Yeah.
How do you deal with all of those things? Because in many cases, your male counterpart maybe doesn't have to dive as deep with that.
Absolutely. This is something that is very top of mind for me. I have a 4 and a 5-year-old, and I'm still in those years where they very much need me. It's still a very physical job with them and mental too. And it is something that I always say, I'm never gonna be like an A+ mom and an A+ boss in the same week. It doesn't happen, and I really had to let go of that and recognize that sometimes I'm gonna be an A+ mom and I'm gonna be a C- businesswoman that week, and then vice versa. Sometimes I'm a C- mom and I'm an A+ boss or a leader, and I think the idea that we can do it all and have it all is just a complete farce and a completely unrealistic expectation. But I go back to that transparency piece. Last week, we all had the flu, my entire family. And I was really honest with my team. I said, you know what? I'm going to do my best to get everything that I can done, but I'm also dealing with sick kids and kids home from school. And that's just what it is versus having to try and pretend that I've got it all together and that my kids aren't homesick and I feel so much for women because I think a lot of times we feel like we can't just say, you know what? I have to put my hand up. I'm going to have to reschedule this meeting. I'm going to have to reschedule this trip or this call or whatever it might be. And I have a wonderful husband who is in it 50-50 with me. And I also know that's not typical, that my husband will work when he can to change his schedule, which is not the case for so many women that I speak to. And I remember reading a book many years ago about Lean In by the woman who is C-suite at Meta, or maybe it was Facebook at that time. I remember reading that before I had kids and not really relating to it. But now that leaning in, because that's the truth of it. In order to be able to lean in, you have to have a partner that is letting you lean in, and because so many women in these years in their 20s and 30s lean out of their career. And I don't hold any judgment for women who do that because raising children is a wonderful, fulfilling, incredible part of life that many women don't want to miss out on. But to think that there's not a rebound of that in your career is insane to me.
Yeah. And especially for young people, they come to that point where they might wanna start having a family, young
Right.
women. And then they basically say, "Do I do the family route or do I do the career?" Sometimes they feel that they have to do one or the other, not and the other.
And I just think culturally, we just have to do a better job of supporting moms and or parents, the parent is going to be the primary caregiver in the family. It's almost impossible how we have it. But I do think with more flexible working and flexibility with the workplace, I think that's helped a lot, at least for my family. My husband and I are not both in the office 5 days a week all day from 9 to 5. Having more flexibility, I think, is a great gift we can give parents. I'm hopeful. Again, raising 2 daughters, I have to be that I want to be a good role model. I love my work. Genuinely, it's such a big part of my identity. It's a big part of who I am. I've built this business really for myself as a 20-something-year-old girl living in New York City to being a mom of two now. I see myself very much in our customer. And so because of that, I love that they get to see me work and get to see me passionate about what I do, and to recognize that sometimes it's going to pull me away from them, but it's also really hopefully giving them something too, both in the short term and in the long term.
So in talking about that and establishing that really healthy work-life balance, what do you think that we can do in the print industry to help, whether it's women, whether it's men who maybe are single parents, or how can we help them to have that healthy life balance without the fear of, I have to take care of my family, but I can't lose this job? Because a lot of
Right.
people have that fear.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree. You hope that employers will understand the balance of being able to, you always like laugh, a meeting that could have been a call kind of a thing, just
Mhm.
working smarter, I think, and recognizing and taking some of the ego out of work. Sometimes we get wrapped up in the idea of what something should be. And it's like when you really break it down, it's, does it need to be that? Does this need to be a week-long business trip? Or could this be 3 days and 2 nights and you work a little bit smarter versus working longer? And I think being a little bit more of a critical thinker in that way, I think critical thinking is the kind of key to it, with that transparency piece as well, of saying what's possible and what's necessary. Those things don't always necessarily line up.
The whole
And
wants versus needs.
correct. And I just thinking having an open mindedness and in an industry that has been very rigid, I would say, for many years. I think it's a hard ship to steer. And so I don't think making crazy changes overnight for a company. I talked to a lot of our vendors and they're old school. A lot of our vendors have been doing business in a certain way for a very long time. And so I don't expect there to be overnight change with a changing of the guard, even if you get a new CEO or new people in the C suite. I don't think things change overnight, but I do think having committees or groups of people like we were talking about before, maybe it's having more voices to set the path of where do we want to be in a year? Where do we want to be in 2 years? Not saying that you're going to give a year maternity leave right away or something
Yeah.
crazy where like, oh, you only give 6 weeks right now. Let's do a year. That jump seems crazy. Maybe it's making smaller changes that can be adapted slowly over time to get you where you're going so that in 2026 or 2027, there might be more of an adaptation to help working parents, help to find them more balance. But I also think it's very top down. Work-life balance is extremely important to me. It's extremely important to my brother. And because it's extremely important to us, it's important to our team too. And we set that. I don't like it. If my team is emailing me at night or on the weekend, I'm like, don't. I don't want you to be emailing me. You should be with your family. You should not be working. And I try never to email at night or email on the weekend unless it's like some sort of emergency, but trying to set that precedent because then if I'm doing that, then they're going to feel the need to do that. So I think it's also just really setting healthy boundaries as someone in a top position for your team because they'll follow suit and to take vacation days and to do all those things because if they don't see you doing it, they're going to feel less comfortable doing it as well.
Yeah, exactly. You lead by example in many
Right.
cases. But then, like you said, printing is, in a way, a very traditional industry. It still is. Yes, it is changing, but there's also things about it that are not going to change. You have people that need to be on press at certain periods of time. There's
Absolutely.
certain roles that can't really have as much flexibility, but can you do split shifts? Are there other things to work in that maybe might help for those working parents?
Absolutely. Yes. And I think that's also the thing is just listening to what they need, listening to what they want. You might not be able to give them everything on a
Mhm.
list of that they need or want, but the dialogue is the most important part. Say, okay, I can't get you everything, but here's what we can do. Because everyone at the end of the day just wants to be heard. They want to be listened to. They want to feel that their point of view is validated and important. And especially in print, we deal with this, anyone probably in manufacturing, it doesn't matter how much the person at the top wants. Every single person in that chain is equally as important from the design and the sailing of the wallpaper down to the person who ships it. It's all equally important, making sure that each part of that is being looked at, those concerns are being taken into account every step along the way, and that you're continuing to follow up and check in because that's the thing about life. What was important to me 7 years ago is different than what's important to me now because I have a almost 6 and 5-year-old. Things change, values change, and concerns and things that you need change. And it's an important part as leaders to be checking in to understand what's important and where we can provide flexibility.
We all know that it's a business.
Yes.
So we have to get the product out for you. It
Right.
needs to be created, it needs to be printed, it needs to be shipped out. If you don't do that, then you don't have a business. So obviously there are some guardrails that you have,
Of
but
course.
then the question is how flexible can you be?
Right.
How, and like you said, maybe it's I can't give you the full list of things, but we can do these and we might be able to do something on some of the others. But again,
Absolutely.
it's listening and being willing to listen, I think is a big thing.
Correct. Absolutely.
So, wrapping up, one of my favorite questions to ask at the end is this one. Knowing what you know now, so with your history in the industry, even some of your family history, if you were just starting out today, what advice would you give yourself?
Ooh, it's such a good question. I think the big thing within our industry is really looking at the technology that's come around in like the last 10 years and really harnessing that a little bit more. I think I had that be like an afterthought for a lot of the beginning of chasing paper. It was a means to an end. I think we're shifting how we're looking at it and technology in terms of, you know, the printing equipment and
Mhm.
technology, of course, too. But even outside of that with different softwares, it's working smarter, not harder. And there has just been so many incredible advances in how we can work and being able to layer some of that technology so that it's really seamless and efficient, just because that's really, to me, where you unlock a really exciting part of business is where things can be so much more streamlined, so much more efficient, so much more cost effective. So I think if I was starting over today, I would just be leaning more, I think, into sort of understanding and staying on top of that technology piece. And I think also I love being in the design industry and it's just been so much fun and I'm so passionate about it. I would certainly want it to be something that I feel excited. I get out of bed in the morning and I'm excited to do and tackle and take on because work is work, but the most enjoyable that you can make it, that's really like a cherry on top. But I do think the technology piece is probably the most exciting thing that's happening in our industry. And I think allowing that to lead would be the place where I would start because there's just incredible things happening. And I can't even imagine where the industry is going to be in 5 years because I think it's changing and things are happening that rapidly.
And all the opportunities that this technology can open up for you.
Yeah, it actually like boggles my after we've gotten off a call with a vendor or just knowing what's coming and what they have in the hopper. It's truly exciting and gets my brain really going on a lot of levels. And that can be anything. It could be the equipment, but it's also materials and substrates and all of the different things. And then when those things come together, it's exciting. So I can't wait. I think there's a lot of wonderful things happening in our industry right now, and I'm excited to see where it goes.
I agree. Elizabeth, it was awesome chatting with you today. I really
Oh, me
appreciate the
too.
time.
Of course, me too. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us on this journey to celebrate and amplify the voices of women in the printing industry. If you have a story to share or know someone whose journey deserves to be highlighted, we'd love to hear from you. Together, let's continue inspiring and empowering the next generation of leaders. Until next time, keep leaving your imprint. This is Her Imprint. See you soon.